Got the wrong theme.
What do you mean that we got the wrong theme? That's the theme to the Zorro song.
Zorro and Son.
Well, okay.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Well,
okay, come on, let's play nice people.
That's what I get for putting two experts on.
Oh my God! Well,
we're getting beat at our own game, Ed.
I did. How could you tell the difference? I thought sure it was our Zorro.
The fox is so living and free.
I thought I heard a little skip in there.
Well, regardless of whether it's Zorro and Son or the Fox Living, it's a catchy theme song. Yep. No matter how you slice. It's a very catchy theme song.
Oh, it sure is.
Okay.
Everybody was singing it back in 1957.
Well, we'll be talking about the theme song and the original Zorro. Maybe not Zorro and Son, but we'll talk about the original Zorro. And Lost in Space, the original Lost in Space. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe I have to say the original Lost in Space, but we'll talk about it more over the course of the next hour. Zorro, of course, the Walt Disney's series starring Guy Williams. It originally aired on ABC from 1957 through 1959. And whether you think of him as the original TV Zorro or as the father of the Space Family Robinson on the cult classic CBS series Lost in Space, Guy Williams has been a fixture in the households of many TV watchers for more than 50 years. Joining us now are two women who know a thing or two about Guy Williams. First, we want to welcome Antoinette Lane. Antoinette Lane is the author of Guy Williams, The Man Behind the Mask, a comprehensive, and I do mean comprehensive, biography of Guy Williams that was recently published by Bear Manor Media. It is a book that was 15 years in the making, but if you're a Guy Williams fan, it is well worth the wait. Antoinette, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Also happy to be here is Kathy Gregory. Kathy Gregory is a mild-mannered travel agent who also happens to be an avid scholar and collector of Guy Williams memorabilia. And from what I understand, it is no stretch to say that Kathy and Antoinette became lifelong friends through their mutual interest in Guy Williams. We will talk about that and more in just a second. But first, Kathy, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Here I am.
Folks, if you want to be part of our conversation, the phone number, as always, is 800-407-KSAV, 800-407-5728. If you want to email address is talk@tvconfidential.net, talk@tvconfidential.net. We will start taking phone calls and reading emails. We've already got a few emails.
Oh, nice.
We'll start reading those in about 20 minutes' time. But first, Antoinette, tell us, how did you come to write Guy Williams, The Man Behind the Mask?
I was watching Zorro one morning when it was Disney had it on the Disney Channel from 1983 for about 20 years. Anyway, I turned it on one day and I hadn't seen it since I was young, and I thought it was a great show. I got hooked on it, and I began to wonder what happened to Guy Williams. He was so handsome and so great in the role, and I couldn't find much about him, so I decided to do it myself. I started researching, and it was before we had computers, so it took a little while to contact people, to find people, and to get the ball rolling. And meeting Kathy helped me help the foundation of the book. She had collected a lot of things on him from magazines, and she was really young. So I just wanted to know, and I found out later through the internet that people all over the world wanted to know too.
You know, it's really interesting. You and you and Kathy, I should say, met because of Guy Williams, and not only did she help you put together this wonderful book by by providing you access to so many of the photographs and some of the research she collected, but you've also become very good friends over the last 2 decades?
Just about.
It's true, yes.
Well, it'll be September of this year. Actually, it'll be 20 years.
And again, this is pre-internet. Well, these things. I mean, I love hearing stories like that, because that is. I don't think we've ever told the story on the air, Frankie. But this is how. I mean, that's basically how Frankie and I met. We didn't meet because of Guy Williams.
Well, actually, Ed, I was looking at the picture that you had on the back of your book for Rockford, and I thought, man, this guy is hot. And, I knew I had to meet you. I mean, my blood was boiling. I couldn't control myself. But no, actually, what happened was Ed had written this book, 20 Years of the Rockford Files, and I was a fanatic about the Rockford Files, and I knew a lot of people behind the scenes, and so I picked up the book, and I knocked it out in about a day, which for me is very good because I read very slowly. And it was so good, and it was so well done, and it said that Ed Robertson resides in San Francisco. Well, I ended up calling, and I got a hold of his mother, and I said, please tell your son that he did a wonderful job, and he's a credit, and thank you. And Ed called me back, and
I was not living with my mother at the time.
No, he was not living with his mother. I just happened to get... Ed has like 12 brothers and sisters, or 11 or whatever, so they're kind of scattered, and it took her a while to find, which kid we were talking about.
Yeah, my number was unlisted at the time, but Frankie, because he's a very dogged guy, he went through all the E. Robertsons, and my father's name happened to begin with the letter E. It was Everett, and so that's how he got hold of my
I was obsessive-compulsive even then, so it actually worked to our benefit. And Ed called me back, and the first night we talked on the phone, we talked 4 hours about the Rockford Files. And I remember my mother asked me about this. She said, what did you guys talk about for 4 hours? I said, the Rockford Files. She said, you mean you found someone as sick and obsessive-compulsive as you are? I said, yeah, and it was great. And that was the beginning of our friendship. So, I understand it. And again, what Ed was saying was this was pre-internet. So that's pretty amazing that you were able to get all this stuff together. And let me say before we start dissecting the book, when Bear Manor was very kind enough to send us a copy of these books, I mean, this thing is like an encyclopedia. I looked at this, I said, you've got to be kidding me. Look at the size of this. Now, I'm a total information guy as far as I want as much information about a subject that I love. And when I looked at this, I said to Ed, because Ed and I have been talking about doing a book on David Jansen. And I said, this is exactly what we want. We want to throw everything in there. Now, to the average person who looks at this, they're going to sit there and say, why would I buy a book on Guy Williams when it's this big? I don't need anything that big. But I'm like, no, you don't understand. If there's, like you said, there's nothing out there. And if we're going to do this thing, we're going to do it right. And that's exactly what you guys did. And you should be very proud of yourselves because I just kept reading and reading and reading. I'm like, oh my God, they've got everything in here but his, but his X-rays, when he twisted his ankle when he was 5 years old. I mean, it's amazing.
That's exactly what I wanted to do. In fact, the biggest compliment I can get is some of the comments on Amazon are that they feel like they met him. See, a lot of people would love to have met Guy Williams. They really loved him. And when they read my book, they feel like they know him and have met him. So that's the biggest compliment I can get. I figured, like you said, I wrote it for the fans who wanted to know.
Well, that's where you're smart, because what'll happen, it's like, when Ed first did the first Rockford book, he was bound by contracts that he had to keep the book at a certain length. So when he updated the book, 30 Years of the Rockford Files, he said to me, what should I put in? Because he said, I could put in at least another 200 or 300 pages. I said, go, because you're doing this for the fans, and we're going to want all that information. And luckily for all of us, that's exactly what he did. And you guys were lucky that you were able to just, do that from the get-go and say, this is for the fans, forget about, if I got to keep it at a certain amount of pages, for the publishers, we're just going to do what we want to do.
Antoinette, let me ask you, how long did it take you to write the book, and at what point did the book really take off for you? Was it talking to a certain person? Was it being another great connection like Kathy? What point did it really take off and become a reality for you?
It took off in '95. It was like 10 years before it was published. 10 years before it was published, when I met Janice Williams, Guy's wife. Mm-hmm. Before that, it was so difficult to get information. I started about in the early '90s. When I met Kathy, I talked about it. We met at the Autry. We had both gone to the theater over there to see a Zorro screening, and she saw my little pin I had on, and we talked, and I told her I wanted to do this, and it took a while. The first 5 years was difficult to find information, and then after I met Janice and we had the computers, it really took off. But it was my first book, so I was learning as I went, learn by doing. I just was determined, so it took a while to learn how to structure it. I read a lot of biographies and did all my research while I was doing this, so the final years, I got it all together. It had to flow and make sense, and then the last year was trying to find a publisher. and he grabbed it. It was so funny because you try, and all of a sudden it comes before the right person who's been looking for you too.